Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight,
we have an inflation crisis, a border crisis, a crime crisis.
It's GOP Day at the Illinois State Fair. How Republicans say they plan to take back control of Illinois and Washington.
We are committed to the safe evacuation of as many people as quickly and as safely as possible.
Chicago area veterans reflect on the Afghanistan war and America's chaotic withdrawal as thousands try to flee the Taliban takeover.
Who wants medicine that works when it works?
Calls to end Chicago's contract with ShotSpotter, which activists say doesn't work. It's not so sad and cold in the big city. A new study on how urban environments help fight depression.
Not only are they safe when they come in, but feel welcome, right? Like, this is my second home.
A new youth hub is underway in Chicago's Austin neighborhood. That and other developments coming to the West Side community.
I'm Angelito, and coming up tonight, we're taking a ride on Chicago history.
And Jeffrey Bayer on the reform school that was once WTTW's neighbor in tonight's Ask Jeffrey.
And Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Austin as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now located on Chicago's west side, Austin is one of the city's largest communities. It's a neighborhood that has dealt with decades of disinvestments, but now the area is starting to see a handful of developments underway, and residents and nonprofits are working to address some of the systemic issues the community faces. But first, Paris, we toss it back to you.
All right, Jenna, we'll look forward to that in just a bit. And now to some of today's top stories. More than 1,000 people gathered today for the funeral of slain Chicago police officer Ella French. French's family and friends were in attendance, as well as scores of officers, including her former partner and current partner's father, who has been an outspoken critic of Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Cardinal Blaise Cupich led the service for the fallen officer and called for unity.
So let us take a step back and put aside any impulse that would divide us, and instead find how connected we can be when we share our burdens, our sorrows, our grieving. Yes, let us grieve together for Ella, but also for all those she cared about, for the children, young and old, cut down by gunfire every day on our streets.
Meanwhile, 5 people were reportedly taken to the hospital for heat stroke during the service. The Chicago Fire Department says 4 police officers and a teenager standing outside St. Rita of Kasha Chapel on the south side were overcome by the heat while they were dressed in full uniform. All are expected to recover. Opponents of the Jackson Park location for the Obama Presidential Center are appealing to the Supreme Court. Protect Our Parks has filed an emergency request to stop demolition work, which started this week. The group lost its case when the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals declined to block the groundbreaking and construction. The group says the center will demolish, quote, significant parts of Jackson Park, which they say will have adverse effects on the environment, landscape, and wildlife. They say they want the court to stop any more work on the center. Tree cutting is scheduled to begin there September 1st. And up next, Amanda Vinicky has a live report from Springfield for GOP Day at the Illinois State Fair. Please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Democrats had their day in the limelight, or rather the hot summer sun. So today was Republicans' turn to get into campaign mode with an annual meeting of the Illinois GOP's top leaders and a rally at the State Fair. Amanda Vinicky joins us now from just inside the fair's main gate. Amanda, what happened today?
Well, Republicans, Paris, hold very little control in Illinois. They're super minorities in the state legislature. They hold no statewide offices, and they make up less than a third of the state's congressional delegation. But they want to change that, and Republican Congressman Darren LaHood of the Peoria area knows what he would want to do if Republicans once again got control of the White House and of Congress.
Ban critical race theory in every diversity training at the federal level. We ought to hire 100,000 new police officers in this country to support law and order. Thirdly, we got to promote and encourage patriotic education, K through 12, teach our kids to love America. And we have an obligation to go after big tech. How ironic is it that the leader of the Taliban has a Twitter account and President Trump doesn't?
Even with congressional district boundaries still undetermined, Illinois Republicans do hope to turn the tide in Washington by winning some competitive districts that are currently in control of Democrats. Now, another big priority is winning back the governor's mansion, or as the relatively new chairman of the Illinois Republican, Don Tracy, put it, saving Illinois from King Pritzker and the drunk with power liberals, as he put it, who are advancing Pritzker's agenda.
Who control his agenda. Under King Pritzker, Illinois is woke and weak and falling behind states governed by Republican governors, many of the states that surround us here in Illinois. So you want to know what my biggest priority is in 2022? If you haven't guessed it, look at the banner. Say it with me. Let's fire Pritzker!
Now, despite that as agenda item number one, the trio of candidates so far in the running to get the chance to take Pritzker on didn't actually get a chance to talk to those presumably very engaged voters at this GOP rally. And Tracy says there wasn't time then, but he says there is plenty of time until the primary because of that law that Democrats passed, pushing back the primary about 4 months until next June. So by my calculations, it's another 313 days away. Now, the Republican gubernatorial candidates did, however, get to speak at a smaller morning meeting, and reporters did catch up with them afterward. So State Senator Darren Bailey, he is a crowd favorite, and he has made a name for himself by filing lawsuits against COVID restrictions that were made by Pritzker via executive order. Bailey says that he is not anti-vax and he is not anti-mask, but he is pro-freedom. Bailey actively campaigns indoors without a mask, but he refuses to say whether he has gotten the coronavirus vaccine.
You know, I don't. Where's the HIPAA rules and the laws? That's
You're allowed. That is not against it.
But you do have the right to tell us or not. I mean, it's your.
Well, I disagree with that. Are we going to walk around with a card on all of our health problems? And that's their right. That's their right. And that's what I stand for. For government to intrude on those issues is completely wrong.
Now, suburban businessman Gary Rabine also says that he is not anti-vax, but he himself is not vaccinated. Although the CDC recommends that those who have recovered from the coronavirus do get the vaccine, Rabine says he had COVID, so he has the antibodies.
CDC can say what they want. I listen to scientists all over the world, and I believe this: vaccines to demand a vaccine in anybody, I think is wrong.
He's also breaking with CDC and other prominent research by saying that he's read some unspecified studies that he says say that thousands of deaths have been caused by the COVID vaccine. Now, Rabine has put about $250,000 into his own campaign so far. He's unsure how much money he's going to continue to spend, but he says, unlike another wealthy Republican who recently put a whole lot of money to win the governor's office, and that's former Republican Governor Bruce Rauner, says he's not like Rauner.
I'm not a private equities guy that has leverage on businesses that I might buy, right? I'm a person that has to build relations of trust to get things done, and that's a big difference compared to otherwise.
Now, former Marine and former Illinois State Senator Paul Schimpf, he takes another view on this issue.
You know, getting everybody that can take the vaccine vaccinated, I think that's how we finally move past this. So I am vaccinated, and I encourage people to get vaccinated.
Schimpf says that he is against COVID vaccine mandates and state mask mandates, though. He is pushing what he calls a parents' bill of rights. He says that Pritzker has abused control of the executive office rather than, he says, what he should be doing, and that's working in a transparent fashion with the state legislature.
A lot of times the mask mandate proponents compare it to seatbelt laws, and when they do that, they're missing the forest from the trees because we have seatbelt laws. Those were laws that were passed through the Illinois General Assembly. They weren't something that was mandated just by executive order or administrative fiat.
Now, one Republican who previously came up short in his bid to be Illinois' governor is Kirk Dillard, and he has an assessment of the field so far.
Well, if the election were today, Governor Pritzker would defeat the candidates for governor, but it's a long way away.
How do you know that?
So, Governor Pritzker has unbelievable amounts of money, and the candidates that are running have to do well in the suburbs. That's going to be the key battleground.
It is widely expected that the Republican primary field is not yet settled. However, you have Dillard himself contemplating a run. He says that business executives are asking him to try to put his name in the ring, but also Republican Congressman Rodney Davis, just on Chicago Tonight last evening, has not ruled out a run. And then there's some quiet talk that other Republicans will also try to still enter the race. And as mentioned previously, they do still have time. And a few Republicans say that while Democrats may have thought that they were doing their party a favor by pushing back the primary until late June of 22, they say that this actually advantages them because it gives them a whole lot more runway to recruit, to consider who's going to be running and trying to perhaps take that moderate stance, and also to fundraise. Paris, speaking of time, State Fair tonight open until midnight, and it runs through Sunday. So I still have time, as does everybody else, to go and get themselves a corn dog, funnel cake, what have you.
Deep fried Oreo, Amanda. Deep fried everything. I think they have deep fried celery down there. All right, a lot to be sorted out there in the Republican primary field. Thank you so much. The Austin neighborhood on the west side has long struggled with gun violence, but residents there are working to bring investments and opportunities to their community. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez and producer Marissa Nelson spent the day in the area as part of our In Your Neighborhood series to learn more about some of the new projects coming to the neighborhood. And Joanna joins us now with more. Joanna.
Now, Paris, that's right. The community is facing many challenges, including gun violence. One organization is working to make a difference. They're called Build, a group working with the youth here on the west side, and they're getting ready to start building a huge facility that will not only help young people, but people of all ages.
Currently in our building, we can probably have about 100 kids, and that's tight. So, but we can pack them in, and that's between inside and outside. Once we open the doors here, we'll be able to have up to 2,000 kids in the building at once. It's a little scary to think. 2,000 kids, but amazing that you would have 2,000 kids who want to be in a positive space doing amazing things.
Adam Alonso is the CEO of Build and is one of the dozens of people who are working to combat violence by bringing big investments to the community.
We have kids, hundreds of them, who are graduating from high schools. We have kids who are planning what they call the summer kickbacks, where they are planning events for their peers here in a safe environment.
The youth center is on West Harrison Street and is expanding to a 3-story, 50,000 square foot campus, a space Alonso says will be transformational for the residents of Austin, providing a technology center, a training kitchen, an athletic facility, a media space, and a woodworking room. The campus will be operating from 6 a.m. until midnight.
There's a lot of amazing things happening. This just happens to be one of them. And when we envision what will be here a year from now, and the feel of it, and what will happen, see the cicadas have to say something, it's going to be amazing, right? And this is what we want for this community, is to give hope and to show them that people do care.
A mission that co-owner Camille Weddington of Sweet Cheesecake is taking on in a smaller scale by giving entrepreneurs an opportunity to showcase their work at her shop.
So we have a program, it's called Ujamaa. And in our Ujamaa program, it's a promotional opportunity where entrepreneurs can display their wares on our shelves. It's not typical, I guess, of a cheesecake shop or a bakery, but when people come in, they get a chance to see handmade artisan crafted stuff that they might take a really good interest in. We have candles by Light of the World. They make a great cheesecake scented candle for us. And we also have a Diascape, and they do amazing tableware, placemats, napkins, hand done.
Weddington has been able to keep the business afloat through the pandemic. She hopes for continued growth in the neighborhood where she was born and raised.
I would love to see thriving storefronts. And that's not difficult. We have the real estate. We just need, I would like to think, resources and the right products. I would like to think products that bring value to a community.
Less than a mile away on Chicago Avenue is Tina Augustus from the Austin Chamber of Commerce. She's in front of the neighborhood's first Black-owned travel agency, Gone Again Travel and Tours. The chamber is preparing to bring the al fresco outdoor dining program to the neighborhood. It will be the first of its kind in Austin.
There's no outdoor seating in the Austin community. There's seating in so many different communities except for the west side. And this was our opportunity, the Austin Chamber, to bring outdoor seating while creating arts and cultural spots.
The Chamber of Commerce is part of a much larger initiative called Austin Forward Together. This map shows 11 projects in the works for the neighborhood, including pop-up basketball courts.
Down the street, we have the Laramie State Bank that will be renovated soon, and mixed housing will be placed there. There will be stores there. So it's a lot of commerce that's coming up and down the Chicago Avenue.
Build's Community Hub is also on the list and is expected to be completed by next year. Alonso emphasizes there is much more to Austin than the gun violence that's in the news. He's confident that in a few years, more and more businesses and families will be investing and staying to live in the community.
We want people to know that if you only look at the bad, you'll always only see the bad. But when you look deeper and you go beyond that, you'll see all the great, amazing things.
As I mentioned, the facility is expected to be completed by fall of 2022, and we're told construction is starting in October. Now, Paris, I toss it back to you.
Thanks, Joanna. The U.S. State Department says it has processed 6,000 people who will soon be departing Afghanistan through the Kabul International Airport. This as officials feverishly try to evacuate U.S. citizens and Afghan allies as the Taliban exerts full control over the country. The chaotic withdrawal and Taliban takeover weighs heavily on the minds of the tens of thousands of American service members who have fought in the 20-year war. And joining us now are two veterans of the war and Chicago natives, Brent Webb, who served in the U.S. Air Force from 2006 to 2012. He was deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, where he flew missions in support of U.S. Special Forces. He's currently the 2nd District Commander of the American Legion in Chicago. And Tom Amenta, formerly a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Amenta served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan in 2002 and 2004, where he was involved in operations to find high-value al-Qaeda targets involved in the September 11th attacks. He's also co-author of the soon-to-be-released book, The 20-Year War, that profiles veterans involved in the global war on terror. A heartfelt thank you both for your service, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us here.
So, Tom Amenta, first, your initial reaction to the images we've seen the last few days of people desperately trying to flee in Kabul and the shockingly swift takeover of the country by the Taliban.
Anger, just fury. I'm so angry. I am so upset. We in the military, one of the things you do is you plan for the best case, the worst case, and the most likely case scenario. And clearly the worst case was never considered because we're seeing it right now. We do not have right now, as many as those 6,000 you're talking about are on their way home, and thank God for that. We don't have a plan right now if the Americans, our citizens, cannot get to Hamid Karzai International Airport. We don't have a plan to go get them. Unlike the Brits, unlike the French that are currently have their special operations troops deployed to go actively bring their people to the airport. And further, we don't have a real solid plan to support and bring our allies back as well. It's just this sounds harsh, but it's an unmitigated disaster right now. And I don't understand how the administration didn't see this or didn't was not willing to accept the possibility of the worst case scenario.
And to that end, we have heard reports on the ground there that there have been trouble for some people getting to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. Brett Webb, your reaction to everything we've seen over the last 5 days?
I think, so being very active in the veteran community here in Chicago, you take a lot of stories from folks. And last Friday, whenever the country started to fall apart, I had a Vietnam veteran at our American Legion Hall come over to me, and he said, he kind of buttonholed me in the hallway, and he goes, hey, Brent, I want you to know that what's about to happen is going to hurt really bad. And I didn't really understand what he meant quite then yet, because I was thinking to myself, well, they still got a chance. I mean, Kabul's not down yet. I mean, the ANA, we've been training them for so long, they got to be putting up a fight, whatever. And then Sunday, whenever we saw that Kabul had fallen or was about to fall, I remember that it was just a lot of feelings of despair, powerlessness, and a sense of just, I suppose you'd say, you can't believe that they let it get this bad. And I think Tom's absolutely right that, this is something that being on the ground in the time we were there, we always try to take all these different scenarios into mind so we can make the plans for them. And it doesn't seem like that happened. And that's extremely frustrating because we wanted this to go differently.
And speaking of all those potential scenarios, yesterday, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, echoed President Biden's comments that the administration didn't think the Taliban would take over so fast. Take a look.
There was nothing that I or anyone else saw that indicated a collapse of this army and this government in 11 days.
Tom Amenta, does it make sense to you that there would be no intel that at least considered this as a possibility that this would happen so fast?
No. And the reason that I say that is when you understand what we were doing and how we were supporting the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police Force, it was primarily through air resources, overhead air cover missions, logistics, and things to help support them to do their mission. And so when you remove those things, you're already going to create a massive problem. But the other thing that we did, and we need to be honest about what we as Americans did to the Afghan National Army and their police force, we demoralized them by leaving in the middle of the night from Bagram Airfield. We didn't even have a proper battlefield handoff with General Miller. We just cased the colors and bounced. So when they're relying on us for the safety of both drone feeds from predators and bombing missions and helicopter support if needed for attack runs, and also the logistics of how to feed them, how to keep their airframes, in their labor, their maintenance, all those things, that's primarily what we're doing. And suddenly all that's gone in the middle of the night. That is going to just be crushing to any military if they have no logistics, let alone expecting your ally. And the other thing the administration is talking about, this questioning their will to fight or anything like that. According to the Brookings Institute, 45,000 Afghan nationals have died in service of that nation over the past 6 years. So this narrative that they somehow don't have the will to fight, that's a 2,000% increase over the number of Americans, KIAs, over the entire length of the war. I'm not trying to make an apples to apples comparison here, or upset someone, but merely point out that this narrative of they somehow didn't have a will to fight or they somehow weren't capable, I just think is false. And I think that when you understand the logistics and the support that we were giving them and how we pulled, frankly, the rug right out from under them in the middle of the night, no less, that should have been factored into that potential worst-case scenario.
Brent, as we mentioned, you deployed in 2010. The President Biden is saying, we should not be there nation building. Did you get a sense of what the overarching purpose or mission of why you were there in 2010 was? And do you have a different feeling on that now?
I do think, and it's funny because it was so long ago and that we've lingered here for such a long period of time. But I believe that even whenever I was in Afghanistan in 2010, I was very excited to go. I know before going, I wanted to say, I want to serve a purpose, a very good purpose for the United States. And it felt like a sense of that when we get there, we're finally going to understand what's happening on the ground, and we're going to understand what we can do to make this work. And then I think that even when we were there, as we were saying kind of before the segment began, is that, a war is made up of many battles. And we went out there and we fought many battles, and we accomplished a lot of things. We were protecting schools. We were taking out, enemies that were clear and present dangers to American troops and coalition troops and everything else. But then I do think even then, and I was a 21-year-old man, even I, working in the intelligence community, could see that there was just a hyper focus on doing these smaller tasks, hoping they would build up to a sort of like a a huge coming together of all these different strategies that led to a unified plan that finally drove out these enemy forces, and that never materialized. And I think, to talk about the earlier question too, is that there was a sense then that a lot of the officers that we worked with in the higher levels, not that there weren't some incredible officers that were working day and night to do the right thing to protect their forces, but there were others that I served with that they simply, I think, they didn't have a sense really of, there was a sense of groupthink that we're just going to continue to do this over and over again, and then it's eventually going to come together. And there wasn't a sense of realism that we really need to look at what is happening on the ground, who are the major players here, and then we have to come up with a really creative plan to make this work. It was just a lot of the same things we did in Vietnam, a lot of coin strategies, counterinsurgency strategies that worked some of the time, and I never felt that there was a unified sort of sense of this is why we're here, and that's led a lot of veterans to question their service and to question, what the meaning of this was. Whenever when I left the war, I said, well, I'll go back again, but I want there to be a really clear sign of leadership about what we're doing here, what the end goal is, and that never materialized.
Certainly a lot of looking back happening now. And Tom Amenta, you mentioned that you feel like everything about this withdrawal has been a disaster. How dangerous is it right now for Afghans that help the United States forces, and what does the United States need to do to be able to safely evacuate them going forward?
Well, I can say that I have gotten communications from friends that are currently trying to exfil people right now in real time, and they are saying that they're getting that their Afghan colleagues are getting text messages or notes put on their door saying that when the Americans leave, you're going to die. And I've heard that from more than one person. I can tell you that the Afghan special operations community, if they don't think that they can get out with us, they're currently rapidly trying to get up north to where the Northern Alliance is so they can attempt to fight, because they know that they're going to be in a gunfight no matter what. They've been highly targeted. And how to get them out? The president of the United States, Joe Biden, has to have the humility to admit that he made a mistake, something he did not do last night in that George Stephanopoulos interview, by saying that he didn't think that he's made a mistake, and he didn't think that that there's anything to apologize for, and send over people that are capable of enforcing the safety of moving this through. You're seeing video of people getting shot at, of ducking from gunfires or trying to get to Hamid Karzai International Airport. I really don't want my friends and current members of the special operations community to have to go in there and put themselves in harm's way. But if we're really going to live up to our promise of bringing these people back, if we're really going to go find a way to get all of these approximately 10,000, 7,500 Americans that are all over the country, we need people that are capable of not just saber rattling, which is what we've done to date, but say, if you mess with us, we will unsheath the sword. I'm not saying do it, to be clear. I am saying that we have to have the capability, which frankly we're lacking, unlike some of our allies like the British and the French. They brought the sword right now. They're not using it, but they will if the Taliban decides that they want to interfere with the pullout of those foreign nationals. All
right, there's just so much to watch for the next few days, and we have to leave it there, even though there's so much more we could discuss. Our thanks again to Brent Webb and Tom Amenta. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you very much
for having us.
And we're back with more in just a moment, so please stay with us.
It really is about community, where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
There's much more ahead on the program, including a new study on how urban environments help fight depression. But first, this weekend, a modified version of the city's Air and Water Show is flying over Lake Michigan. And arts correspondent Angel Ito knows just where to take in the aerial views. Why? From Lake Michigan, of course. She introduces us to a boat tour packed with Chicago facts.
You're actually riding on a piece of Chicago history.
All aboard the Chicago Fireboat, better known as Fred A. Bousset. Unlike most of the other boats docked along Lake Michigan, this one has both a special connection to the city and the Air and Water Show.
This is going to be your most unique boat that you're going to see out on the water.
This boat was built in 1936. It was the city's first diesel-powered fireboat for the city of Chicago, specifically designed to fit underneath all the bridges.
Using water directly from the lake, a fireboat helps put out flames along the shoreline.
When this was an active fireboat, it was part of the air and water show where it would, they would put on a display, they would shoot off all the water cannons.
Now this boat was fully functional until 1981. Now it just rides the waves, offering educational tours of both the city's history and the boat's history as well. Now, these tours will take place during the weekend's modified air and water shows in which only the Blue Angels will perform. Regardless, for Navy veterans and co-owners Eric Toch and Ray Novak, being able to showcase their hometown on a military or utility-type vessel is an experience unlike any other.
One of the really coolest experiences that we get a chance to have is family members that had loved ones that served on the boat or the other old fireboats, and they would tell us stories or they would give us pictures of their loved ones. That's, for us, the most heartwarming thing to get.
Whether it's for a family outing or to learn more about the Windy City, this is truly a ride on a piece of Chicago history.
It's just iconic. We're like one of two old fireboats, the other one's in New York.
This weekend specifically, it's really a special event. Like the whole air and water show is usually pretty cool, but the main part that people want to see is always the Blue Angels. You just feel the energy from the planes. They're going so fast, or jets I should say, they're not planes, but it's really a special experience.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Great shots there. Tours during the Air and Water Show are this Saturday and Sunday from 11:30 to 1:30, with tickets selling for $75 for adults and $55 for kids. There's a multitude of other tours offered through November. You can visit our website for more information. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, addressing violence on the West Side, we talk with an Austin community leader about Build Chicago's intervention and prevention programs.
You went to a doctor, right, a hospital, and they had an 86% fail rate. Would you keep going to that doctor? No!
Activists are demanding the city end its contract with what they say is an ineffective gun detection system. How ShotSpotter is responding. A new study explores how the built environment and social interactions, both good and bad, lead to lower rates of depression in cities versus suburbs and small towns. And what became a Chicago school for wayward boys? Jeffrey Bayer has the answer to that in tonight's Ask Jeffrey. But first, some more of today's top stories. The life of Chicago police officer Ella French was celebrated today by more than 1,000 people who packed St. Rita of Kasha Chapel and outside the parish. Friends and family remembered her for her kindness, her humor, passion, and love of dogs. Her mother talked about her gratitude for all the support she's received.
I want to thank each and every one of you for your presence here today. Ella would be honored. I especially want to thank all the members of law enforcement present. Ella was so proud to be a member of your family. I close with the words I always told Ella as she headed into work. Be careful and be safe.
And now we go back to Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day reporting in Austin as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Now, thanks, Paris. Now we're here with Liz Abuno, owner of 40 Acres Fresh Market. How are you doing today?
It's warm out.
It's a nice day, right?
Yes.
So I want to start off, for those who don't know what 40 Acres Fresh Market is, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in the past years?
Yeah, so 40 Acres Fresh Market is a small grocery business that launched in January of 2018 to address the food access need in the Austin community. We started with pop-up markets and have expanded to managing farmers markets, more pop-up markets, and daily delivery service. And in Q3 of 2022, we are set to open our very first brick-and-mortar grocery store on Chicago Avenue at Chicago and Waller.
How exciting is that? Tell us about this new grocery store coming to the neighborhood.
It's really exciting. It's definitely a process that I don't think even I anticipated at first. We're really doing transformational change with this grocery store. We want a place where people can not only come to buy healthy food, but people have jobs. We want better infrastructure in the neighborhood. A place where people can go and meet their neighbors and just have like an experience around wellness and food and health and commerce in their own community. So like we're changing streetscapes, we're moving curb cuts, we're doing a whole lot of stuff. It's actually like bringing in a whole lot of departments across the city. And so it's really exciting, and but it's really complex work. But we're making it happen with our partners at Westside Health Authority. And yeah, so we're estimating that by about this time next year, or maybe like September, October next year, we'll be ready to open.
That's amazing. And in the meantime, you're also hosting a farmer's market, correct, here in the neighborhood?
Yes. So the city of Chicago sponsors city markets in neighborhoods across Chicago, and we manage the one here in Austin at the Austin Town Hall, 5610 West Lake Street. It's every Thursday from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. So you'll not only find 40 Acres, you'll find our friends like Thank God for Raw and Vegan Treats, and Big Tasties Desserts, and Supreme Bean Pie, and Brenna's Greenhouse. So like there's just like, Chicago Meat Collective too, we love them.
I love them.
And so yeah, it's like a real farmer's market right here in Austin, so everybody should come by every Thursday. We're there through September 30th.
I love that. And very quickly, why is this work important to you?
It's so important because it goes beyond, we always say it's more than just food. We're developing a healthy community holistically. It's the jobs. It's, like I said, it's the place for wellness. It's making the community more walkable. It's drawing more businesses in because the grocery store is an anchor. And so we're just really excited to be a part of that, especially on Chicago Ave as the Soul City Corridor comes to life.
Thank you, Liz. So many good things happening here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Why, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Paris, stay tuned. In a few minutes, we're talking about violence, intervention, and prevention. But right now, we toss it back to you.
All right, Jenna, you can sense her passion for that. Really exciting development there in Austin. And up next, concerns over Chicago's ShotSpotter contract. But first, we take a look at the weather. Activists and youth leaders are calling out the city's contract with the ShotSpotter system. They say that the Chicago Police Department extended their agreement with an ineffective gunfire detection technology behind closed doors. WTTW News reporter Matt Massison joins us now with more. So Matt, this contract with ShotSpotter was set to expire today. What are community members demanding from city leaders?
So these activists want to see this contract canceled completely. The city has reportedly agreed to a new 2-year deal with ShotSpotter to keep using this technology into 2023. And police say that it plays a big role in helping to reduce crime and helping make neighborhoods safer. It's not unusual to go into any bond hearing and listen to them reference ShotSpotter evidence on a regular basis. But these activists today are much more skeptical, and they say that ShotSpotter is not only ineffective, but it also can put people into danger by sending police into communities when they think there's a report of gunfire on high alert, and it can often be a false alarm.
And here's what one of the activists said today about ShotSpotter.
Surveillance in our community, that is 86%, and turns up no crime at all, right? Officers are being deployed needlessly in our communities, and they're treating all of our people like a suspect.
So what she's contending there is ShotSpotter sends out false alarms too often. Too often it says there's gunshots fired, but it's something else. Is there any data that shows how effective ShotSpotter is?
That stat that she referenced there, that's from a report published earlier this year by the MacArthur Justice Center at Northwestern that found that 86% of ShotSpotter alerts did not result in any sort of police report or any crime or incident that had been committed. And that was a big point of contention for the activists who were speaking today, that Chicago is wasting millions of dollars on this technology that is not providing useful results for the city in any meaningful way.
Is there any counter evidence that shows that it does?
Yeah. ShotSpotter responded to me today. They said that MacArthur Justice Center report reached some erroneous conclusions. They instead pointed to their own report, or a separate report, I should say, that found that they have a 97% accuracy rate. And the company has touted itself, saying that they've been integral to Chicago's, quote, comprehensive efforts to reduce gun violence over the past several years. They say that this technology is working and will continue to work for the next 2 years.
So competing reports, competing sets of data there. All right, Matt, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
For folks considering leaving the city for the suburbs, here's something to consider. A new study out of the University of Chicago concludes that rates of depression are lower in big cities than they are in suburbs or small towns. This despite the problems that cities have faced, like crime and congestion. And joining us is one of the study's co-authors, Luis Betancourt, professor of ecology and evolution at the University of Chicago. Luis Betancourt, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, so explain your findings for us, if you would.
So we assembled several sources of bigger data that allow us to characterize symptoms of depression in U.S. populations organized in different cities. And these are studies from the Centers for Disease Control, from National Administration of Mental Health, and also from social media. And so what we find is, somewhat surprisingly, is that rates of depression are smaller in larger cities. And they do so in a way that's consistent with the fact that in larger cities, people have more social contacts, larger social networks. And that is known to be protective against certain mental diseases, particularly depression. So what we find is essentially this effect that in larger cities, people may have other problems, but in regards to depression, their rates tend to be smaller. So there's less risk of depression.
So you're saying that the big factor here is socialization. People are in more crowded spaces. They're interacting with people more. Is this a main factor that causes depression, lack of this?
Yes, that's exactly what we think is going on. And that's what's characteristic of a city as a whole, which is for which we have data in this study. So the signature that we get is that essentially, if you live in a larger city, you tend to do more things with more people. A lot of these relationships are not, deep in terms of friends and family, but allow you to see different things, have more choice, have different points of view, and that is known to be protective against depression. And we put together facts that we had from previous studies that predict a certain form by which the number of people that you know increases with city size. Together with the fact that having more of those contacts leads to a smaller risk of depression, and we get the effect that we measure.
And you mentioned
exactly that. Having more people. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, is that exactly that? Is that having larger social circles seems to be a major factor at the scale of cities that's protective. Now, this is not true of everybody in detail, but works at the level of the entire cities.
Now, you say you looked at all kinds of different research for this. Tell me about some of the data that you analyzed to come to these conclusions.
Right. So mental health is hard to diagnose, but there are certain ways in which both the Center for Disease Control and other federal bureaus measure sort of the onset of depressive symptoms. And these are national surveys that have become big enough now to be organized in different cities. So we use that kind of data with somewhat traditional and sort of a gold standard, but then we used also a lot of Twitter data that's been analyzed more and more recently to judge sentiment. And so it's been shown in sort of some smaller studies that you can actually tell if somebody is expressing depressive symptoms with good confidence by analyzing how they're talking on Twitter. So we use both, and the results are consistent between all these different sources. And so this is what allows us to both, have confidence in the results of the study, but also push them a little bit towards having larger populations.
Are there tangible public policy initiatives that you would recommend coming out of your findings in this study?
Well, so, depression is a major issue in public health and has an enormous cost. There are many causes to depression. Often at the individual level, it's seen as a sign of aging or unemployment, other social stresses, segregation. But what our findings show is that there's a generic effect that greater socialization, even when it is somewhat superficial, as we have in a larger city, is protective. What we're trying to do now with better data and other colleagues is to look more specifically than inside cities, where we know that obviously different populations, for example, by socioeconomic status or by employment status, will have different challenges. And by doing that, we'll be able to target, more local populations where typically policy is being developed. For example, as we are doing in Chicago in relation to neighborhood.
So, Luis, I guess what I want to know, though, is a lot of people do live in suburbs or small towns. So are there things that planners there can do to increase social interactions or the built environment to reduce depression?
Yeah, exactly. So some of the results that we are reporting include the suburbs in the sense that they belong to larger cities. But if you live in a suburb, in some sense, there's more isolation built in. So it requires that you're still connected to other people through commuting and other activities, but that those become more intentional. So that intentionality is important. And when it's lost, for example, through COVID, it has a lot of consequences for mental health, as we know, but we're finding out more. From the point of view of smaller towns and places in the country that are losing population, I think this gives us a bit of an alert that mental health is also expected to degrade, and that we should think about activities and places that bring people together, that create sort of the possibility of more sort of accidental and joyful, serendipitous social interaction, and that also may create, new sources of choice and purpose in people's lives. But this has to be done more intentionally in places where this doesn't happen more naturally, like in the public spaces of bigger cities.
All right. Well, very interesting research, and our thanks to Luis Betancourt. Thank you so much.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
And now we check back in with Joanna Hernandez, who's reporting live in Austin on the west side as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Thanks, Paris. We're here with Bradley Johnson, Director of External Affairs at Build. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
That's awesome. Now, I want to start off. Chicago, like many other cities have been dealing with gun violence. The West Side has also been dealing with that. Now, what is something that Build is doing to, respond to what's going on in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Build, our response to gun violence is giving opportunity in activities, things that we're offering young people in place of violence, in place of guns, in place of drugs, in place of gang involvement. We're offering them hope and opportunity through a myriad of programs, from arts to music to dance to sports to technology, music production, all those things. So including the farm, like we're standing right here on our iris garden, a mini farm with chickens. So this is something that we offer to our young people to show them something else that's possible for them.
I love that. And how do you talk with the youth when you do hear of another shooting in the neighborhood? What is that process like for them?
Well, number one is trauma. Many times you try to pretend like it doesn't bother you. I grew up in the neighborhood, so I know you have to have your game face when you're outside. And so you try to suppress it, but you really can't. And so what I talk to them about is that there's help, there's hope, there's some opportunities that we can offer you. And also mental health support services, everything that they may possibly need to help them to move forward. I think that it's really important that we offer those things to them, and we do often.
What is a program that these youth really excel in?
Wow. They love the music and they love the art, visual art and music. Definitely visual art, because that becomes a therapeutic tool where they are able to release things that are inside of them through painting and through design and other things like that they're doing. So those are awesome.
That's amazing. I want to ask one last question. What is some advice that you would give to a young person who is in a tough situation right now?
I would definitely tell them that, number one, there's hope. With all the things going on around us, it's easy to think that there's not, but a place like Build and other partners as well, we're offering programs and opportunities for them to find what they need. And so we'll offer support to the families, to that young person, but we'll just give them an avenue. We'll show them and support them so that they can move forward in their lives.
Thank you so much, Bradley, for joining us. Now, Paris, that is all for us here today. We toss it back to you.
All right, Joanna, thank you so much. And up next, the backstory of Chicago's School for Wayward Boys in an encore edition of Ask Jeffrey. Stick around. For For about 70 years, Chicago boys who were chronic school skippers were sent to a residential facility in a bucolic setting just about 600 feet from where I'm sitting right now here at WTTW. Our own history teacher, Mr. Bayer, is here with a lesson about the Chicago Parental School in tonight's Ask Jeffrey. Hello, Mr. Bayer. How are you?
I'm fine, Mr. Schutz. How are you?
No, you don't have to call me Mr. Schutz. All right, our question comes from Max Safer in North Park, again, right around here. What was the story of the Chicago Parental School previously located at St. Louis Avenue and Bernard? Also near that site was a Victory Garden. What was its history?
Okay, so as you mentioned, this question definitely hits close to home. WTTW's studio is just steps away from where the Chicago Parental School stood until the early 1980s. Today, it's the campus of Northeastern Illinois University. The school was established in 1902 to educate, this is the Chicago Parental School, was established in 1902 to rehabilitate boys aged 7 to 14 who were behaviorally troubled or chronically truant. The 50-acre campus was just north of Foster Avenue and a little east of Pulaski.
And why did they call it the Parental School?
Well, so the parental refers to the school taking parental responsibility for the children while they lived there. Over its 70 years, the Parental School's campus grew to include a farm with gardens and animals, playgrounds, a swimming pool, and healthcare and manual training facilities. CPS architect William Bryce Mundy designed the school's buildings, which were arranged around a large central water basin, which you can see them enjoying there. The 10 cottages, as they were called, held 35 residents each, including cottage parents. These were married couples who helped take care of the children.
So, Jeffrey, how would a kid wind up at this school?
Well, the parental school's origins go back to the social reform movement of the late 19th century, early 20th century, led by people like Jane Addams. It was established to enforce laws that compelled parents to send their children to school for a certain amount of days every year. So truant officers would track down school skippers and could petition courts to commit them to the Chicago Parental School for rehabilitation. But boys could also be sent there just for being deemed incorrigible. And it's important to note that children could actually be committed to this school without their parents' consent.
Wow, and just for being deemed incorrigible. So what was it like for kids there? What was their life like?
Yeah, how did they rehabilitate them? Well, in its early days, the school's approach was similar to military training. Drills and uniforms to provide the discipline and structure that they thought the boys lacked, and to teach them what were considered good habits and morals away from what they thought were negative influences. Education in all the usual subjects was offered, as well as school activities, after-school activities and vocational training. Students tended the gardens and farm animals, and they were responsible for keeping the cottages clean. And they even had a school newspaper named, wait for it, The Skipper. Most boys attended the school for several months before returning home.
So you mentioned tending the gardens. This gets to the other point the viewer's mentioning, the Victory Gardens. Are those the Victory Gardens that the viewer's talking about?
They were. So those gardens were part of the school until World War II, and then the school actually allowed 300 neighborhood families to use them for their own Victory Gardens.
And unless I'm missing something, the parental school's no longer there, so why did it close?
Yeah, it's a big open field now out behind WTTW. Well, some other institutions started adding buildings to the property. First, in 1961, the Chicago Teachers College, as we've said, now Northeastern Illinois University, built some buildings there. And in 1965, here's an early photo of WTTW studios, which were basically right next to the old parental school buildings. And here's a look at that same view today. In 1973, NEIU, Northeastern Illinois University, took on the responsibility for the parental school. But by then, public sentiment on how to deal with truancy and delinquency was really shifting towards keeping children in their own homes or in foster homes. 2 years later, state funding ran out, and that was pretty much the end for the Chicago Parental School.
And I recognize those buildings, obviously, Jeffrey. So how is chronic truancy handled now?
Oh, well, CPS does have alternative schools for students struggling with attendance or other issues, but they don't have residential schools.
And all those beautiful old buildings, obviously you said it's an empty field now. What happened to those buildings? NEIU, Northeastern Illinois University, reused some of the school buildings, but lack of funding from the state really caused them to deteriorate. And actually, Paris, in a rather grim postscript, a neighborhood teenager committed suicide in one of the abandoned buildings, and after that, all of them were razed. Today, the only hint that the buildings ever existed are these benches outside the NEIU athletic complex, and they are made from ornamental limestone fragments that were reclaimed from the Chicago Parental School's administrative building. And I know those benches well, and now I know why they're there. All right, Jeffrey, thank you so much, as always. My pleasure. And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about the Chicago Parental School and get educated about several other Ask Jeffrey topics. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Baer. That's all at WTTW.com/AskJeffrey. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that is our show for this Thursday night. Please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.